Hey folks, happy Friday. The final 20 years or so of David's life are marked by a lot of personal tragedy and pain. And it begins with his oldest son, Amnon, who is portrayed as over-indulgent and selfish. And he's pining for his younger half-sister, Tamar, who is portrayed as beautiful. She's not married, she's a virgin, and she's highly valued in David's court. Now, an advisor to Amnon, a man named Jonadab, who is also David's nephew, tells Amnon and says, "Hey, look, if you love her, just pretend to be ill, and when David comes to visit you, ask him to send Tamar to prepare some food for you." So Amnon does that, and David agrees and sends Tamar, and she prepares food for him. But instead of Amnon being grateful, frankly, he sends out all of the servants and rapes Tamar. And then to make matters worse, the Bible says that he despises her after his act of violence towards her and has her thrown out. Tamar says this is worse than the crime itself. Now David hears about this, he's furious, but he does nothing. Absalom, who is David's son and also the full brother of Tamar, he comforts Tamar and brings her into his home, but he's also plotting his revenge. He allows 2 years to go past, and then he plans a sheep shearing celebration and invites all of David's sons, including Amnon. Now, Amnon is well known for his overindulgence, and so Absalom instructs his servants that when Amnon is drunk, they're to kill him, which they do. Now, the other brothers, they see that the oldest son is dead, and they flee Absalom's home to Jerusalem. David gets a report of it, and he believes that all of his sons have been killed, and he's weeping, he's mourning. But then he gets a more specific report from Jonadab, who is complicit in much of this. And Jonadab tells him, no, it's just Amnon who's been killed. So David is mourning the loss of his son, and he longs to be with Absalom. Now, the story doesn't need a lot of complicated interpretation. It sort of stands on its own. It's a story of a innocent young woman who's sexually abused by an older half-brother and vindicated by an older full brother. But what is maybe not as obvious is David's response to all of this, because this is a recurring behavior in David's life. He just struggles to confront these strong-willed young men in his life. And we first see it with his nephews, Asahel, Abishai, and Joab. And he says, these sons of Zeruiah, who is his sister, they're too strong for me. And now we see it with his own sons. Because it was David who should have brought comfort to Tamar. It was David that should have been brought justice to this whole situation and confronted his son Amnon. But instead, because of his lack of action, it caused a great deal of animosity and division between him and Absalom, until eventually Absalom would revolt and try to usurp David's throne, and in the end, Absalom would be killed. So it's just a very tragic story. Now, when you look at the life of David, it's difficult. I mean, it's hard to not admire him. In fact, to be envious of him. I mean, here's a guy. He's good looking. He's rich. He's powerful. He's an international leader. He has all these beautiful wives, and on top of all of that, he's a very gifted musician. But when you sort of look past the veneer of all of the externals of his life, you see someone who's deeply flawed, that has a lot of personal failure and tragedy. And folks, we all have that. When we look beyond the external trappings, we see a lot of the same suffering that plagues every human. And the Bible tells us to run our own race, to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. We're supposed to be looking forward, not supposed to be looking over our shoulders, seeing if we're keeping up with everybody, or sort of being envious with those that are running before us. We're supposed to be content and run in our own lane, run our own race. And when we do that, we are far happier. When I do it, I'm far more content and far more at peace with my life. The Bible hasn't called me to be the best David I can be. The Bible calls me to be the best Jim I can be, transformed by God's Spirit and by His Word. And when I do that, I'm a far happier person. And frankly, folks, you will too. So keep your eyes focused on Jesus, run your race, stay in your line, and we will all be far more content. I hope this encourages some of y'all today. If it does, give this video a like and a share to encourage someone else. And as always, get out there and make the world a better place because you're in it. Thanks for watching, y'all. I'll talk to you again soon.